talk today. I'm presuming you're all wearing clothes, I think, and we've all dressed up connected to the context of this talk. So this is hopefully going to help you make some more informed decisions in the future. But yeah, it's a huge problem. Actually, so much so that we created a course for it. So actually, in weeks, I'm leading these sustainable fashion course. And I already went through that course, talked to you why she's here as well today. First things first. What does our clothing mean to us? And just take a moment, just think about that. What are you wearing? What's in your closet? Does any of it have a particular meaning for you? Somebody today, I said, nice shirt, I like the shirt. And he said, thanks, it was a Christmas present. So immediately, you could see that there was this memory attached to their piece of clothing. But does that mean that's always the case? Thinking about, again, just what you're wearing today. Is anything kind of special? Think about that, think about your closet. So the important thing here is our relationship, or maybe lack of relationship to clothing. And this is really part of the story as to why we got to this point. Why is fast fashion, ultra fast fashion even, why is it such a problem today? Thinking about how clothing represents us, how it shows our style and our power, and how it's used in activism. I see, again, like the salmon forever, wild salmon forever. Like, sometimes we can use clothing as forms of activism. It can be used to help us blend in. It can be used to help us stand out. It's often linked to things like power and cultural expression, sometimes cultural oppression. There's definitely cases in history in the Incan Empire, for example, where specific colors were given to specific members of society, and it denoted their class. Only certain colors were saved for the most powerful. But it is variable, obviously, across time, across place. Thinking about a leather jacket, for example, what did that mean in the 1950s versus what did it mean today? It changes. It's a form of communication. How do we value our clothes? Again, think about that. Keep that in your mind, especially as you go to the store next time. Especially as you choose your necktie. It's even harder to define this when we're on our phone. And Cameron's going to talk about this in a few seconds. Literally removed from touching, feeling, holding that item. Now we're swiping 3 times and we've bought it and purchased an item. How we value our clothes is a really important piece of this story as well. Again, Cameron's going to go into it a little bit more about the context of social media. But here we're seeing the process being seen, us feeling seen. This is so psychological, so behavioral, and biologically. How do you feel when you purchase a new item? Isn't it kind of exhilarating? Has anyone ever gone shopping when they're just had a bad day? Had a bad week? I just need some retail therapy. Just go and you feel good now. This is all part of the story of fast fashion. Is it essential? Is it functional? What you've purchased, steel-toed boots, for example, for your work, or is it exhibition? Does it have the label, the brand, or the swoosh mark that you want to show that you're into fitness or into athletics? How are you using this item? But essentially, cheap clothing is your consolation prize. This quote comes from a very good, very powerful, pretty depressing documentary called Truth Cost. It is your consolation prize. Now, you're acutely aware. Food is more expensive. Housing is more expensive. Education is more expensive. Driving your car is more expensive. Healthcare. Everything is literally more expensive except clothing. Why is that? How come clothing is cheaper? We'll get into that a little bit, but just think about the ethical implication of cheaper clothing. Most of the cost savings has been on the human side. Countries and workers abroad have been squeezed literally to death so that clothing prices can come down. This is your consolation prize. So this is a little wake-up call. This really resonated for me actually as I developed the course during Team 1 in this context. It is powerful to think that we feel successful because we can go out and spend $100 and get 20 items. But actually, are we successful? Are we successful as a society because we can go purchase cheap clothing? distraction. But this is at the heart, again, of how we got to this extended problem. Okay. Yes, so this is a little confusing, lots happening, but all of these things you mentioned here, starting at the year 2000. Again, do you remember how many people, not even today, how many people are on the planet? Looking at my colleagues. 8 billion people. 8 billion. Not obviously all with the same purchasing power, but 50 billion units of clothes created each year created, and that was in 2000. The thing to remember across 15 years is that's doubled. 100 billion. That's even more today. 100 billion. That does not include shoes. Shoes is astonishing. Any number of shoes you can imagine each year made 4 billion pairs of shoes for 8 billion people. Shoes are actually really interesting, like even the ones I'm wearing, because, and take a look at what you're wearing. How many discrete parts are in your shoes? The rubber, the cloth, the glue, the plastic, the cotton, and they're impossible to use. So thinking about the quantity, so that's definitely been an increase. And your purchasing power, this kind of orange one, this is GDP, so it's not even your salary, but just to show that it's not exponential. It's pretty static. Your salary is even more flat. So that's been a variant. And we see clothing sales, again, kind of extremely rising. Utilization is in blue. How long we keep clothes? Again, think of your closet. What's the oldest thing you might have in there? What's the average length of time you kept a piece of clothing? If you discarded clothing, why? Thinking about those questions is really important, because the length of time for keeping things is going right now. And interestingly, the stuff that you probably have a relationship with is a gift. I got it at graduation. This is for my grandmother. My friend made it for me. Those are the things you're never going to get rid of. The relationship is lacking in our current clothing supply. This is another trend. So this is polyester. Polyester, and I won't make you do it, but check your labels when you get home. Check your labels of your clothing. It's always interesting to see what is plastic. So polyester is plastic, acrylic, nylon. Those are all plastics. Fossil fuel-based fiber. That's the pink. And that was around exactly the year 2000. That's when polyester overtook cotton as one of the dominant forms of fiber in our clothing. And that again, make no mistake, that is one of the major consequences of polyester taking over, is how cheap clothing can become with cheap fuel, cheap inputs. The other correlation around the year 2000, social media, which Cameron was talking about, all around that year, you could see a very big difference with how we purchase clothing, consume clothing, how long we keep it, what it's made out of. Any guesses as to which one is polyester? These are all different forms. Go back over here. Feeling local way over the edge? This one? All of them are both. Oh, you made it a trick question. I like that. You've been in classes before. This is polyester. But, let's show the next one. Yeah, so what's interesting is all of the different things. You don't think about this, I don't think. But usually when you go to clothes, you buy clothes, you might go, it's really soft. Or I like that it's comfortable, or that it's cool, or it's flexible, or it's maybe durable. It keeps me warm. Okay? So a lot of the animal, we can say that all of this is, we might call it like organic, so this is like biologically created. But you can see why wool is itchy. Right? Wool itchy. Keeps you warm though, and you can understand why the fibers interlock, captures that heat. Look, too. So it's plastic, it's man-made. And it's literally couldn't really be formed in nature. Even silk, which is obviously super soft, isn't as uniform as this. But polyester is very durable. There's reasons why you buy it, especially with things like your athletic clothing. There's reasons why you buy it. But it also doesn't absorb water. Cotton does. But then it also can get rickety. So all of this to say, there's different fibers for different reasons. But why we purchase something is also, again, a reason why fast fashion is increasing. Check your fibers, so go home today, and also just take note. how many items are one fiber? You're going to struggle. I think we're always hungry as a society for just the answer. What's the answer? And it's obviously, don't buy anything. That's the answer. That's the answer. Are you comfortable with that? That's the answer. Don't stop consuming. But there's obviously need for consumption. There's need for retail growth and jobs and economies. I get that. But what is the answer? It depends. The answer is it depends. And I'm sorry that that's the answer. But it depends. Because you might think anything organic, like biologically made, cotton, for example, is the answer. That's the best one because it's a plant. And then you can compost it in theory. You can take it and compost it afterwards. But this is an example of why it depends. If you're thinking about can it be composted at the end, yes, cotton is a good option. But it uses so much water. I don't know if you realize the extent of water. This is a lake, as you see here on the edge of Kazakhstan, disappeared from water irrigation for cotton plantations. The fourth largest lake, formerly, in the world, disappearing because almost exclusively of irrigation for cotton growth. In a t-shirt and pair of jeans, it's about a kilo of cotton. And you probably know what cotton is like, right? It's just a little cotton ball, super light. So a kilo of cotton is quite a lot of cotton. It takes almost 20,000 liters just for the plant to grow and live and produce that much cotton. 20,000 liters of water. So it depends. If you're thinking about water, cotton's not great. Fossil fuels, polyester might be the better option. If you're worried about microplastics, definitely not polyester. It just depends. There's all these ethical implications. There's forced labor. There's lots of things that are introduced into the course. We don't have time to get into them today. But the complexity of this topic is huge. And it extends to all sorts of things. Cars, electric vehicles, everything that we're seeing out there, everything has an impact. And our job is to always try to assess the trade-offs. So yes, there are alternative fibers. That's the next question I get. Well, cotton's not good, polyester's not good, what else? And there's all sorts of cool stuff. I wanted to give you some ideas of hope because there's some fun things happening. This is all mushrooms. Mushrooms are really cool right now, actually. There's a lot of investment into mushrooms for things like alternative meats, for CO2 production. There's all sorts of fun things happening with mushrooms. This is mushroom. That's mushroom fiber. These are mushroom fibers. That's mushroom leather. But it's often coated. So we do get to a point with the fiber that it doesn't have to usually be coated with something like latex or plastic just to keep it integrally together. So mushrooms are there. Yeah. This is, there's a lot of work being done on waste from the agricultural sector. This is pineapple waste. So pineapple waste being kind of shredded out, dried, teased to make it fluffy, and then put into fibers. These are all from Pina Tech. Again, awesome, because you're using a waste that would just go into landfill. Usually, still, is coated with something. So that's a pretty cool option. All sorts. This is one shoes from aloe vera, recycled bottles, sugarcane. Econo is using things like waste from the oceans, so like fishing nets and stuff, repurposing them into polyesters. This is fish leather, again, another waste product from the fish market. So once the fish is taken out, the skins would just be left to the landfill, but now they're repurposed them. There's lots of options, but they always come with some impact. And before I leave you, I'll just kind of introduce this idea. Within sustainability, we always talk about circularity. As we hear the drums, it's actually a very distinctly indigenous perspective as well. The idea that we can reuse our waste. But in the building sector, what we see is that make waste recycle, living. What we'd love to see more of is looping the waste back into make art. But we're not there yet. So what we see now is we have 97% virgin stuff. When you're buying items, it comes again at a cost. And my mother-in-law, I love her, she definitely in the mindset of, I'll just get your son this t-shirt, it's only a couch. She goes, okay, it's only $1. So that's not pretty. It's not gonna last long. She's just buy another one. Live long, very disposable. And this is again where Cameron's gonna come in and talk now because the idea of clothing
fashion in particular to start off with. And I just want to start off with kind of a question for all of you. So regarding the fashion industry and its environmental and social impacts, what are things that social media is helping with sustainability? Please raise your hand. A few? Okay. And who thinks that social media is hurting sustainability? More of you? Okay, some people. Okay, perfect. Okay, so typically, in the past, brands used to produce one collection of clothing per season, so 4 per year. However, now we're shifting to what are known as micro seasons. So fast fashion brands have now shifted to micro seasons and produce as many as 1 new collection of clothing per week. So this is what we would consider ultra fast fashion. So if you're kind of wondering how this is possible, to put it in perspective, companies like Shein, if you've heard of them, are adding as many as 6,000 new and unique items to their online storefronts every single day. So that is how this is happening as those are called ultra fast fashion companies, and that is what is fueling these micro seasons. So how does this happen? Well, social media has played a pretty major role in the growth of fast and ultra fast fashion companies. But first I'm going to be going through the different ways that social media influencers or content creators, so people that have a larger social media following for things like fashion or art or makeup or music, anything, they have a larger audience that they share with and look up to them. So I'm going to be talking about how they play a major part of this. So it often starts off with the introduction of trends, and that often leads to fast fashion companies sponsoring social media influencers to promote their clothing, which often involves them doing things like clothing hauls, which I will get into, as well as creating their own social storefronts. So I'm going to get into each of these a little bit more in depth. So starting with trends. So when looking at trends, there are typically 5 identifiable stages. So first we start off with the introduction of the trend, and then we get to the rise in popularity of the trend until it hits its peak. And then it starts to decline until it eventually becomes obsolete. So while trends have always been around, they used to last years, right? And now they only last even like a few weeks or a few months. They're significantly decreasing in the amount of time that they last. They're just changing like instantly. So how does it get to this point? So brand sponsorships. So brands will often reach out to social media influencers to partner with them by paying them to advertise their brand. This often involves the brand selling them boxes of, like sending the influencers like hauls of clothing, like boxes of for free, to then promote on their social media pages. So they often include discount codes and affiliate links for the influencers' follows to use, which increases sales for the brand, but it also brings in income for the influencer. So they are also often required to promote the brand through a very scripted advertisement that the brand will provide them with, and along with other very strict criteria in how the influencer must promote the brand to their followers. Now, I'm sure many of you in this room have followed someone on social media or had a public figure that you look up to and you admire them in a way. And it starts to get to a point where they almost feel like a friend. You have like a sense of trust and connection with them. And this is the same thing that is happening with influencers. And I know for me, I definitely look up to my friends and I ask them for recommendations and advice on things, and it's the same thing for influencers. There's no difference because they still feel like a friend to me, even though I've never actually met them in person, in real life, but I still feel like I want to take their advice. So this can be super influential because when they're sharing these product recommendations with their followers, we're more likely to be able to want to take their advice and to buy these products that we don't even know that they're necessarily using. So a lot of these influencers are being sent clothing that they might not necessarily even like, they may not wear them, but they're being paid as part of their job. It's giving them an income. So we're going to take their recommendations, and some of them we don't even necessarily want or need, but just because we trust them and want to be like them. So next, moving on to clothing hauls. So from these brand sponsorships, like I mentioned, social media influencers will often get sent hauls of clothing that they will then share and promote on their platform. So doing clothing hauls is definitely a big form of content creation for these influencers, and that's how they're getting an income. And they've gotten very popular on social media platforms and showcase all of the new micro trends that influence and fuel the ultra fast fashion industry. So these items are often very poorly made, very cheaply made, and they're not only filling our landfills because they only last a few wears, but they're also flooding our thrift stores and overwhelming them. So they're making thrifting, unfortunately, not as sustainable as it once was. And I had a friend ask me the other day, she said, do you think in 10, 20 years, vintage clothing will be a thing anymore? And it really kind of stopped me in tracks. I don't think so. You know, like now you can go thrifting, you can find like, you know, clothes that I look up the brand and it was from 30 years ago. Like that's amazing. It's lasted so long. But now with fast fashion just taking over, they're not made to last that long. And I don't think vintage clothing will be a thing for much longer, which is very sad to say. Okay, so lastly we have social storefronts. So more and more businesses are making their products available to purchase through online stores, which is great because it is a lot more accessible to a lot of people. But now we're seeing more storefronts popping up within social media apps themselves, like TikTok and Instagram. So we no longer have to actually visit a specific online shopping website that we have intentionally gone onto to look at to buy a specific piece of clothing that we need or want to buy. Instead, trending outfits are popping up on our social media feeds, and within a few swipes, like Stefania had mentioned, we can order something right to our doorstep. It can literally take seconds. You might just be going on to Instagram to catch up with a friend, and next thing you know, you're buying a new item. So also we have things like influencer storefronts. So using platforms like Amazon storefront or Like to Know It, influencers can curate their own storefronts. They don't have to have any of their own personal products, but they create their own storefront of products that they maybe have been sponsored by brands to promote, or products that they may like. And they create these storefronts that their followers can then go to buy all of the things that, to be just like them and to use all the things that they're using. And this just fuels consumerism. Okay, so while social media influencers, they do play a big role in our consumption patterns for sure, it's also really important to look at the role that social media algorithms play as well. So the more we use social media or just the internet in general, the more data it stores about our personal usage of it and the more personalized our ads get. So brands and content creators, they can also pay for their posts and ads to be featured more on people's social media feeds. So we're constantly just being fed more and more ads, and they're consistently getting more personal and tailored to our interests. This can then lead to what many people call doom scrolling. So this is basically where one ad or link or a post leads to another, and another, and another, and suddenly you've bought 3 things that you didn't even know you were looking for, didn't know you wanted, and you probably didn't even need it. And this is what can lead to overconsumption. So we end up buying a lot more things that we don't necessarily need or want. So now that we've learned a little bit about how social media can play a really big role in the harm towards sustainable, or harm towards fast fashion, then how can we take advantage of its potential influence to progress the sustainable fashion movement? So one way is by using it as an educational tool to inform people about the harm being done and create awareness that the harm that the fast fashion industry is having on our environment and society. So here are just a couple of examples of some sustainable fashion content creators and activists that that I like to follow, and just how they have used their platforms to inform their followers on the harm that's being done by the fast fashion industry. So you can see here, it becomes very personal because you can now have pictures of something that is happening across, in another country, and we see clothes. We all wear clothes. That's something that we can relate to. I can look at that picture and say, yeah, I wear clothes like that, but I had no idea that when I'm done with my piece of clothing that it can end up somewhere across the world in a landfill. And that one specifically is seen from space. That's really alarming. And those kind of things hit home to people, and it triggers an emotional response, and we want to be able to do something. Well, now I'm seeing that, how do I not make that happen? How do I take some control over that? And another one here is even just short little quotes, short little facts. Like, the average American is said to throw away about 81 pounds of clothes every year. That's a lot. That is a lot. Or every season, about 30% of the clothes produced are never sold. How can I play a part? So it's really important to take a look at these creators and activists that are sharing the harm that is being done. And not only is it really important to raise awareness to the harm being done, but it's equally important to share what consumers can do to take part in sustainable fashion practices and make a difference. So there are some incredible platforms that share some really easy tips and guides on how consumers can break their habits and support the fast fashion industry in a way that's very accessible, and it can be easily and very quickly shared to so many people. You don't have to be going to school for it. I am, but you don't have to be doing that. You don't have to be doing all of the research yourself. It can be shared so easily, and it's really important to take advantage of that. And the last thing I want to touch on is that there has also been a rise of slow fashion creators that are able to exist because of social media. So I have personally come across so many individuals that are creating one-of-a-kind clothing from things that would normally be thrown in the trash, sent to the landfill, go to a thrift store and maybe never even make it onto the floor. And so, for example, here, there's this one person that I came across on TikTok, and they have started up their own business by, they get people to send them their clothes that they can no longer wear. So they're no longer going to wear them, or they have holes in them, or whatever the case may be, and they send them to her, and she creates one of a kind, like, super unique piece of clothing that they can then wear, and she'll send it back to them, and there's their piece of clothing that increases its longevity. So this kind of thing, it diverts textile waste, it increases longevity, and it produces production demand. And yeah, social media is allowing these businesses to exist and thrive. I mean, it's amazing to be able to have like storefronts like locally to do this as well, so that you're not having to ship items across. But it's better to ship it to someone that's going to create it into something new, rather than it being shipped across the world to a landfill where we're not going to see it. So I just wanted to end off with saying that social media has played a major role in what has gotten us into the problem of fast fashion and overconsumption. However, it can also be a way out if we take advantage of that. Thank you. And we also just have some resources and some kind of key takeaways. So if you want to scan any of the QR codes, there's some social media accounts, and then also a really great website called Good On You. And they're incredible. They're my #1 recommendation to anyone looking for more sustainable fashion options. They have an Instagram account, but they also have a website and an app, and they rate fashion brands all across the globe from their impact on people, planet, and animals. And so they look at sustainability very in depth, and you can actually go on and do like filters, so they have a whole database where, say you're looking for a new pair of jeans, but you want to make sure that there's like inclusive sizing and that they're in a certain budget, and you want them to be made in Canada, then they will give you a list of all of the ones that fit that criteria. So they're definitely a really great one for anyone looking to find more sustainable fashion options. But yeah, there's some key takeaways, and thank you so much.
want to ask a question?
I just have a question about like recycling and what that looks like, and whether or not is composting an option? Is that type of recycling, or is there that?
Yeah, with recycling, there's usually two, I suppose three ways. There's chemical recycling, where you can like literally put it into a solution that dissolves the fibers, especially when things are blended. There's mechanical recycling that shreds all the fibers and then can repurpose them. And then there's the composting, which obviously takes quite a long time. And one of our colleagues is testing out a variety of fibers to see how long each takes to be composed. You have to sort of worry as well if it's anything kind of fossil fuel based, how it might leach any chemicals into the fiber environment, like soils. But cotton, for sure, that could be composted, absolutely.
Okay. I just need to follow up. How mature is the chemical recycling process for like polyester? Because I'm sure there's different polyester.
It's getting pretty advanced. I have a slide on it. I didn't include it, but there are some companies looking specifically at chemical recycling. Again, the problem, as you'll find when you look at your fibers, everything is blended. The majority of your items are blended. And then when you try to recycle it, you can imagine like any type of recycling, an aluminum can, for example, you want just one material. Because if you have blended materials, then you risk corruption or contamination of the recycling supply. So when it comes to blended fibers, that is a chemical decomposition recycling method. It's getting a little bit more advanced, but it's expensive. So again, you're getting into like this, is it cheaper just to get new fibers? Yes. The cost of just getting polyester is way cheaper than trying to chemically decompose it and create new fibers from that. So it's a little frustrating that part. The role of thrift is really important. Cameron touched upon that. But I think the thing just to get your head around is that it doesn't eliminate thrift. I think sometimes when we throw things away or donate, we're like, problem solved. Guilt-free is done. Everything's good now. But it still exists in the world. And so everything is just delayed. You just extended the life of that product. It's still great and noble. The impact is just delayed. Eventually, it will be disposed of. And we worked a little bit with MCC in Abbotsford. You know, it's a big, huge MCC center trip. Fascinating. And they get, I would say, a cubic meter of clothes about every 40 minutes donated. And that's one thrift store in Canada. And it's about every 40 minutes. And sometimes they have to stop because they get too much. And then I see them in the back and they have so much, they go, no, yes, no, yes. So probably 20% of whatever they get makes it to them.
Yes, that's consistent.
Oh,
Yes, 20%. That's not too
and the rest of it goes into, typically, it goes abroad. That's a whole different.
So I was thinking is that fundamentally what we are looking to change is consumer behavior, right? That's where we are looking for solutions. When the consumer looks at a piece of clothing or any item for that matter, we associate a value with it based on the money that we pay. Is there any I understand it might be very difficult, but is there any modeling available that tells you other costs that are associated with the product? So like you mentioned, if there's cotton, that cotton is made of this much, that clothing is made of this much cotton and costed this much water. If you have that information available to you, purchasing that thing becomes a more conscious decision rather than that.
I think the issue with that, like that would be incredible, and I think we would all buy a lot less, and I think a lot differently than we do if we were to know exactly what it was all made of. And I think the issue with that is that, fast fashion brands who are the ones that we are concerned about, they're not going to be doing that. So unless there's actual regulations that are put in place where they have to, that would be amazing. I've seen even like tags where it does like a full breakdown, but those are very sustainable brands that have researched, and those are the ones that are like showcasing like all the ways that they're being sustainable. The fast fashion brands are very minimal, and then you need to greenwashing, and has a whole other topic too. Yeah.
It's really interesting. We actually have another student who did some research scanning terminology, and she found, I think, something like 200 terms being used out there from like green, sustainable, eco, like all of, yes, there's so much, and what does it mean? Because sustainability as a term is not trademarked. Anybody can use it. The only ones that are trademarked are fair trade and organic. That's it. Everything else, open season for interpretation. And so yeah, the Good On You website is a really good one because it does, not for all brands, the biggest brands it monitors, so just your little ones here in Vancouver, for example, it wouldn't capture that. But it gives you some idea of like what fibers it uses, and also again things like wool, silk, those come from animals, and there's a lot of there's a lot of use in some parts of the world on those fiber production areas. For, like silk, for example, you have to be steamed alive, so that's doing this really sad. Okay, but yeah, the idea is just like being informed, but then you have to just weigh your trade-off because there's really again there's no way to make zero impact. So if you're worried about water, that's a choice. If you're worried about land use, that's another choice. If you're worried about microplastics, that's a different decision. Animal health.
So a lot of the times when you come to the end of the discussion, it often seems that the problem is at the production end, where we are producing more than we need, and then we have to come up with a lot of these Olympics and stuff that makes people buy more. Systematically, system level, do you think there's any way we can actually put caps on production? Like, for 8 billion people, you have 10 times more shoes being produced. It doesn't make sense, right?
Is there any, I mean, it would be a wonderful thing. But is there any other example? I mean, like cars, or is there anything else in consumer? Yeah, and so I think
not in these ways.
Yeah,
I think the idea of controlled production comes from Marxist systems, but that's the
well, and so some luxury brands would control the number of quantities, right? So when there's scarcity, then it increases its value or its perceived value. So sometimes they use it, but that's not the brand of Shein and Uber and some of these other ultra fast fashion. They don't even have brick and mortar stores; they have just online presence. And that's where they're able to produce 6,000 items a day. They'll see what the Kardashians are wearing in that episode and literally produce it that day. So as long as we are still chasing a vision, an ideal of who we would like to be, because there's no chance we can't afford a house, we can't buy a car, but I can look like Kourtney Kardashian. Unless we start changing what we value, then that's the major thing. But with the presence of social media, I think like you mentioned, we can shock you into maybe changing your vision. Or, policy could come in, but then you're affecting jobs and everything, everybody starts getting upset. So it's delicate. Changing behavior, working in environmental studies, Doran works at U of T's manager of office sustainability. Human behavior is number one, the biggest opportunity, strategy, but also the biggest problem. How do we affect human behavior is a whole specialization. Environmental psychology